Welcome to this DVD on antisocial behaviour and how to report it. The aim of this DVD is to explain what will happen once you've made your complaint, from the initial phone call all the way to what happens in court if it comes to legal intervention. You can watch the DVD all the way through if you wish, or navigate to the chapters menu to see a complete breakdown of all of the areas discussed.
Antisocial behaviour is any behaviour which causes or is likely to cause harassment, alarm or distress to somebody who is not a member of the same household. Common types of antisocial behaviour are criminal damage and low-level vandalism such as graffiti, verbal abuse, intimidation and harassment, noisy neighbours, nuisance neighbours, barking dogs, and those sorts of things.
Charnwood Neighbourhood Housing and Charnwood Borough Council have a joint approach to antisocial behaviour. The three important values are: rights. All our residents have the right to live in decent, warm, safe homes, in decent, clean, safe neighbourhoods, free from fear of nuisance, harassment or crime. Responsibilities. Our residents also have responsibilities to ensure that they and their families, friends, visitors and animals behave appropriately. Respect. We also expect our residents to respect their homes, their partners, their neighbourhood and all other people. If you feel your way of life is being disturbed by tenants ignoring the 3 R's, then you may have a case for antisocial behaviour. To make a complaint, you can speak to your housing officer if you know who they are. If not, then you can email Charnwood at tenancy.services@cnh.org.uk, or alternatively give us a call on 01509 634 666. We take all complaints very seriously and make a number of promises to you upon receiving your complaint. We will respond to your complaint within 5 working days. If the complaint is serious, we will respond within 24 hours. We will inform you of our policy on antisocial behaviour. We will agree an action plan with you. We will keep accurate and detailed records of antisocial behaviour cases. We will report criminal behaviour and vandalism to the police. We will be in weekly contact with you or agree with you how often you want us to keep in touch. If eviction is considered, we will let social services, the housing needs team and other support services know what is going on. We will support victims of antisocial behaviour. Once you've made your complaint, one of the things we will ask you to do is to keep a log of all instances of the antisocial behaviour and start compiling evidence so we can proceed with your complaint.
We ask complainants to log any incidents, and that needs to include the dates, the times, where the incident occurred, what the incident was, and that's extremely important for us because it gives us an opportunity to put to the perpetrator, on this date, at this time, this is what happened, what is your response, but also if necessary, if lower level interventions fail and we need to go to court, we can transfer that information into a witness statement. So we can give specific times, dates, when the incident occurs. If it relates to loud music, it's also very important because we involve environmental health, the Council's Environmental Health Service, and were they to consider issuing a noise abatement notice, we need to be able to show that it's a persistent nuisance and not just a one-off. So that's very, very important for us and it builds our case against the perpetrator.
Best evidence is something that you have directly seen or heard yourself. This is very important. For example, the following statement would be considered best evidence.
On Saturday 27th of April 2010 at 8 p.m, my neighbour was playing his stereo so loudly it made my ornaments vibrate. I could not hear my television and had to leave my house because I could not stand it any longer.
If all you were to say was,
my neighbour always plays his stereo very loudly.
while this is evidence, it would not be considered best evidence because it is a generalisation and not a specific incident. Equally, if you were to say,
my friend at number 31 said my neighbour was playing his stereo very loudly last Saturday.
this would not be best evidence, but would be something called hearsay evidence, which is still admissible, but would not have as great an impact as something which you had directly seen or heard yourself. Whilst you are collecting evidence, Charnwood Neighbourhood Housing will be proceeding with your complaint. We take what we call an incremental approach.
The incremental approach is a fancy word for talking about a ladder which we go up in terms of complaints of antisocial behaviour. The first thing that we would do when you make a complaint to us is issue a verbal warning to the person that you're complaining about. So we do that within 5 days of receiving your complaint. There are circumstances where that won't be successful, and what we then do is go up our ladder to the next step, which is a written warning. A written warning does much the same as a verbal warning, but makes it a little bit more official. And we again reiterate to the person causing the problem that their behaviour is not acceptable, and we ask them to stop. If the written warning isn't successful, we then go up to the third step on our ladder, which is a consideration of mediation. Mediation is where we look at bringing in an outside party to talk between yourself and the person that you're complaining about, to see if there's some common ground that can be found. Again, mediation is very useful for certain circumstances. The most typical circumstance is where there's a clash of lifestyles. So it may be that there's an older person living next door to a brand new tenant who's perhaps 16, 17-year-old, possibly with a young baby. And the learning to understand each other in terms of what's acceptable and what's not can take some time, and trained mediators are on hand therefore to work through that with all parties. If mediation is not appropriate, or we've tried it and we're not getting anywhere, what we will then do is look to go up to our fourth step on our ladder, which is the acceptable behaviour contract. An acceptable behaviour contract, put simply, is a written list of rules that we negotiate with the person causing the problem in terms of what we are asking them not to do. It may be what we're asking them to do, and also what support we will give that person in terms of moderating their behaviour. The acceptable behaviour contract needs monitoring, because there is no point in us writing a set of rules for somebody who sits there and says yes, that's fine, goes away and then doesn't comply. So there's an element of monitoring, and in that monitoring it can range from weekly monitoring to fortnightly monitoring to perhaps monthly monitoring if the person is complying with what's expected of them. There will be circumstances where the acceptable behaviour contract is broken. And what we then need to do is consider our higher level legal interventions, and it's only at this point that we'd consider those legal interventions. So we would then be looking perhaps at an antisocial behaviour injunction, an antisocial behaviour order, or as a very last resort we would be considering possession proceedings, which means evicting that person from their home. There are exceptional circumstances where we will override steps in our ladder. And the most notable ones being where there's a significant risk to your life or to your safety. Obviously, if complaints were made of such a serious nature that we were concerned for your safety, it would seem a little bit ridiculous to go and give a verbal warning to that person.
Charnwood tenant Rex Underwood was the victim of nearby excessive noise and shares his experience of bringing the issue to a resolution.
The dogs were a nuisance, but it was a building nuisance. It built up until there were 13 dogs there. Disturbance was obviously not totally continuous, but there was never a prolonged break, day or night. A file was prepared here of the incidents, the duration, volume, and time, location of all the incidents. The noise abatement team worked at this continuously, numerous visits. Eventually it brought the noise down and eventually solved the problem altogether. A lot of work on their part, and achieved an end which by no means I could have achieved myself. They were always there, always available, and would act where it was necessary. If you've got these problems of antisocial behaviour that are disturbing your way of life, talk to the team. They're quite real people. They do understand what happens, and they do something about it. They do have a long procedure to deal with, for which they'll explain reasons for, and they will do the job.
The early stages of the incremental approach resolve the majority of antisocial behaviour cases quickly and quietly. However, in a small number of cases we will have to take legal action. This section of the DVD looks at what happens if your case reaches a level requiring legal intervention and taking your complaint to court.
There are two main legal interventions that we can use. These are the higher level interventions and they form at the top of our incremental approach. These interventions are only used in a very few antisocial behaviour cases, and the point to stress is that in the majority of antisocial behaviour cases we will not be looking at injunctions and we will not be looking at antisocial behaviour orders. We will have resolved your complaint long before we ever need to get to these legal interventions. In, however, a very small amount of cases we do have to look at legal interventions. The two main ones that we look at are the antisocial behaviour order, known as the ASBO, and also the antisocial behaviour injunction, which is known as an ASB. A little bit complicated, I know, but essentially both legal interventions, the ASBO and the ASB, are doing the same thing. They are an instruction from the courts to the perpetrator as to a set of conduct of what they are allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. If either of those orders are broken, either the ASB or the ASBO, they are punishable by prison sentences.
In terms of evidence to support legal proceedings, in particular antisocial behaviour orders and antisocial behaviour injunctions, the courts will need to be satisfied that members of the public have been caused some level of harassment, alarm and distress. And the way in which we're able to satisfy the courts that that has occurred is by providing witness testimony to that effect. Now, where possible, if witnesses feel able to come forward and are prepared to enter the courts and take the witness stand, that evidence is always best for us. If a member of the public can tell the judge directly how they've been affected by the antisocial behaviour that's been perpetrated against them, then that evidence is always going to have the greatest value. But on occasions when members of the public don't feel able to come forward, they're either nervous about appearing in court or are afraid that the perpetrator will find out their identity, then we can still introduce that evidence, but we can use a professional witness to take that evidence into court on behalf of the complainant. So the message really is, even if you're not prepared to go to court, it's still important that you share what's happened with you, with the housing officer, with the local authorities community safety team or with the police, because there are ways in which that evidence can be introduced to court without their identity being disclosed.
If your case goes to court, Charnwood Neighbourhood Housing have entered into a partnership with the National Victim Support Scheme to offer a witness support service that's dedicated specifically to you. What that will allow is, on the day of the court, it will allow you to be greeted at the court by a witness support representative. That witness support representative will take you into a room on your own, so you don't have to sit with anybody else waiting for court appearances. More importantly, you don't have to sit anywhere near the perpetrator until the moment of the trial. The witness support service will also sit with you during the time that you're giving evidence in court to give you support, and will take you out of the courtroom after you've given your evidence and debrief you in a quiet, calm, controlled arena, and explain to you what actually happened in court and what the consequences are of any orders that the court have made. The other thing that the witness support scheme will do prior to you ever attending court is offer you the opportunity to go and look round the court before the hearing date, so you can see what the court looks like, where you'll be sitting, where the judge will be sitting, and this is all designed to make you feel as comfortable as possible on the day of the hearing.
You will initially receive a letter to tell you to arrive at court at a certain time. It's probably advisable to try and get there just a little bit earlier if you can. You will go in through the main entrance where everybody, all the court people, myself included, all the barristers have to go through security. You may be asked to open your bag to show what's inside and you have to go through a metal detector. This is in all our interests for everybody to do that. Okay? When you go through security, if you ask the security people, they will point you out to the witness service desk. The witness service desk is manned by one of us until probably about 10:30 in the morning. If you come and find somebody on the witness service desk, we will then bring you into the safe area here. If there's nobody on the desk, a big sign by the entrance to the witness service where there is a buzzer. If you press the buzzer, somebody will come and collect you immediately. We will then take it upon ourselves to make sure that we liaise with the prosecutors and the people within that case to ensure that the witness gets to court, the right court, at the right time. We sort of liaise with these people on behalf of the witness to make sure they don't really have to worry about that at all. It would be a good idea to bring a close friend or a relative with you. I think it's always good to have somebody apart from us who perhaps they can lean on. In addition to that, it might be a good idea to bring a book to alleviate the boredom, as there is a lot of sitting around. Also, they might need a small amount of cash, perhaps for some lunch or to pay car parking fees. It's quite important that if you bring your car here, to park in a car park that's pay on exit rather than pay on display, because if you use pay on display, you're probably going to run out of time and will have to go and move your car at an inconvenient moment. So you need some money, perhaps something to read, but perhaps more importantly, a close friend or relative to come with you. We know that coming to court for everybody really is a daunting prospect. If you've got to solve these problems with antisocial behaviour, you've got to do it. We're here to show you that it's not quite as difficult and as bad as you might think it is. So please, come to County Court. The witness service will look after you and hopefully make your day a lot less stressful than you think it might be.
Cherie Tenenti is another Charnwood tenant who took her case to court to stop drug abuse and antisocial behaviour in her area.
Yeah, about 2.5 years ago, my husband basically had an accident which put him in a wheelchair, and that's when we started to notice what was really going on the estate, the drug dealing, the antisocial behaviour, the groups of kids hanging around, all that kind of thing. One of the reasons that made us take a stand is that one of the druggies that were getting drugs off the estate actually approached our 12-year-old and was asking him to buy sweets from a plastic bag, buy this bag of sweets for a tenner. So we decided to take a stance and we started a community group, and then we started talking to our local housing officer, council, local police team, and decided that was the way we wanted to go. I can't express how much support we got. It was just there. Because I think after Mario died, if I hadn't had the support from the housing officers and the police officers and Charnwood Neighbourhood Housing, I don't think I would have took that step to go to court. The housing officers, the police, all of them were fantastic. We knew exactly what was going on, when it was going to take place, and if the date changed at the last minute, because they did actually have to change it because unfortunately my husband passed away and we were due to go to court. Was it near his funeral? Near the funeral, so we had to change that, and they were absolutely fantastic, just changed it for us. My mother-in-law came with me, which was an added bonus, and they were quite happy for her to come, and it's just the support that you get really. It's very much worth going through the process, because now we actually have people that are willing to make a stand. It was like, we'll see what happens to them 2 people, because we were one of the only 2 people who would say anything. But now there is actually people queuing up to report people for drug dealing, antisocial behaviour. So it is a bonus, and it's made this place a hell of a lot better.
For further details on any of the issues you've seen on this DVD, please contact Charnwood Neighbourhood Housing or Charnwood Borough Council.